Hello and welcome to Metro TV. In this episode, I'm going to introduce XAML. XAML stands for Extensible Application Markup Language, and it's what we use, the language that we use to define our UIs in Windows Phone. It's also used in WPF and Silverlight, as well as Windows Workflow Foundation. For this video, we're just going to discuss how we use it in Windows Phone. So this page here that we can see on the designer is defined by the following XAML. Okay? XAML, again, stands for Extensible Application Language, and is the syntax is based on XML. Because it's an XML document, it must follow the same syntax rules. And it's very, very strict about following or adhering to those rules. So it's not like HTML where you can forget to do certain things, or forget to close some tags, and the whole processor or the parser will forgive you about it. XAML is not very forgiving about syntax errors, so the document must be properly formatted under the XML syntax. So the way that we define objects in XAML is by providing what we call the element syntax. Now, I say defining objects because XAML is nothing more than a serialization format for CLR objects. So we use XAML, we use elements to initiate objects, CLR objects. So everything that we can do in XAML, we can also do it in C# or VB in code. Everything that we can do in code, we can also do it in XAML. Some things, though, are easier to express declaratively, like UI, which is why we use it in Windows Phone. So every single document must have what we call the root element, or the root, the root element. In this case, the root element is this phone application page. Now, every element must also be closed, must have a closing tag for that element. There's two ways that we can create a closing tag for the element. One way, as we can see here, is inside of this element. At the end of the document, rather, we have the mashing tag, but with an / right before the name of the element. This is how we tell XAML, or the XAML parser, that we're basically ending the declaration for that object. Another way that we can do it is by, if we don't want to define anything else, if we're not going to provide any shell elements to that property, we can simply close it by just providing the / right before or at the end of the element declaration. Okay. So elements have attributes, and attributes are basically used to define or to provide values to properties in the objects. So for instance here, this particular object takes this namespace declaration, and this is what we use to basically include namespaces into the document. If we look down here, this entire UI that we see here is defined by this portion here. So we basically have a grid. A grid has two column definitions. Inside of that grid, we have a stack panel and another grid. Now, another syntax that you're going to see here, which we're using it to define the road for this stack panel, is what we call the attach property syntax here. So in this case, we are attaching the property of the parent element, in this case the grid, so that we can provide a value to that particular property. Okay. So in this case, what we're saying is that this particular stack panel is going to go inside of, is going to go in the first row of our grid. For the grid that we have defined here in the bottom, we can see that we have provided a row 1 as a destination for that grid. That gives us this this layout. We have a grid with two rows, 1 and 2. In row 1, we have a stack panel with two documents, or two controls, and on the bottom of the grid, we just have a an empty grid at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some values, some controls here into this grid here. So go back to the SAML. Instead of using the grid control, I'm going to use another control, or one that we already used here. I'm going to use the stack panel. Now there are two types of controls that we use to define UIs. They are content controls, and we also have layout controls. For layout controls, we have things like the grid, we have stack panel, we have canvas. Some of the third-party control kits have other layout controls. For instance, the wrap panel, which comes on the Silverlight 2 kit. So in this case, we're going to use a stack panel, and the stack panel is used to define or to lay out objects, one on top of one another. Or if you change the orientation, you can also put objects side by side. So in this case, I'm just going to provide a simple UI to add some data entry to our application. So the first thing that I need is I need a label. So inside of a content UI or a layout UI, I can have multiple elements. Inside of a content control, I can only have I can only have one additional content control inside of another content control. So in this case here, I use the stack panel. I'm going to put let's see, text block. We're going to provide it a name. So the name here is going to be XName, and the reason we name it is if we want to be able to access this control via code, it must have a name. So this is going to be label 1, and the text property is going to be set to task on name. Now again, I can close it by a matching end tag, or I can just close it by providing the / at the end of the element declaration, which is a little nicer if I don't have to define anything inside of the control. So I'm going to just copy this a couple more times. And obviously I have to give it different names. So name 1, 3. And we also want to keep track of, let's see, task description, and I don't know, maybe a due date. All right, so if we go back to a designer, we can see that even though it's rendering via the controls, it's not really having the effect that we planned. Right? You can see everything is being rendered all the way on the top. The reason for it is because if we go back here to the SAML real quick, let's go here. I have this stack panel, but I really haven't tell it where to lay it out. I have 2 rows here on this grid, but I basically just added this panel here and said, just go ahead and render yourself. So it's going to render to the very top of the cell, right? It's going to render in cell 1, row 1, or row 1, column 1. So if I want to tell the stack panel to render itself on the second row of the grid, again, I have to use the attach property syntax, and then provide it with row 1 or the second row. In this case, if we go back, we see that now we have our labels in the place that we need them to be. All right, so the other thing that we need to define is a couple of text blocks, or not blocks, but text boxes. So I'm going to come in here again and just type them in. So let's call this, well, this is a text block. And again, we need to provide a name. So this is going to be, I don't know, let's call this, well, name box, just so that we won't confuse anything. And let's just close it for now. And we're going to put 1 underneath each one of the labels. So again, let's just change the name here. This is the description, Yeah, there we go. Can't type for now. And let's also change this to date box. All right. So if we go back and notice that we now have a nice set of text boxes to go along with our UIs. Now, one thing that you might notice here is that our layout is a little bit off. And there's a couple ways that you can use to fix it, but what I want to mention is that every single control has a margin property that you can assign to it. So if we go back here to our labels, I can simply go in here and add some margin. So the first one is going to be the left to right. So in this case, if I just do 12, notice that our label moved about 12, well, not about 12 pixels to the right. The second definition, I believe, is from top to bottom, if I'm not mistaken. And the other one would be from left to right, and then the last one will be for from top to bottom, or from bottom to top. I can remember exactly the order, but there we go. So let's just call that 0 again, and it looks like 12 is a good number. It looks like it's lining up now. So let's go ahead and change the margin for the other labels. Now I don't have to specify every single one, right? I can just say, look, I just want to change the left to right margin, and that's totally okay. So let's do the last one here. Again, co-margin. You will be very much inclined to use margins to control the layout of your controls, and I will definitely say that you shouldn't do that. You should use margins just to literally just change the spacing in between two controls, but don't use it. Say if you want to move this here to the left, don't use that by providing a huge margin. Like don't do this, right? Don't change this to 100 just to change the location of that margin. That doesn't really look good. No, that doesn't look good. It's just not the proper way of doing it. Now, another thing that XAML, another feature is very powerful in XAML is its binding capabilities. So for instance here, if I want to provide a value for text, what I can do is I can actually bind this value to the data context, or to a property in the data context. And to do that, I'm going to use the accessibility syntax, which basically is just by providing the brackets and then the name of the extension provider. In this case, this is the binding provider, and then providing the name of the property. So we're going to name this, or we're going to bind this to the name property on our objects. If you remember from the first video that we did, we have a view model set for this view of tasks. So we have tasks have name and descriptions and due dates. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to specify what property on that object I want to bind to. I can actually also bind to other elements and not just objects. So I can bind to values in other properties if I want to. So let's go back here and change the text here for, where's the other, there you go. And let's do binding here. It's going to be set to description. Oops, let's go. Like that. Binding can also we can also provide the mode that we want the binding. We can do binding to be 2 ways, 1 way. We can bind, and there's different settings that we can add to our binding as well. But for now, we're about 50 minutes in, so we're going to leave it like this. Hopefully you enjoy. In the next one, we'll do more XAML.